One of the hardest things for us to figure out on our respective mental health journeys is determining what we should be working on or what we should be trying to change about ourselves, our thoughts, our feelings, our habits, and what we should accept about ourselves and say, I think this is just the way that I am, and I think I need to learn to just deal with it rather than try to change it. I am generally of the opinion that people are way too quick to jump to the acceptance side of that continuum in most cases, and that we as humans are very prone to underestimating our capacity for change. However, even a very behavioral therapist like me will acknowledge that there are some core elements of who we are that don't really seem to change no matter how hard we try. And while it can cause us tremendous problems to accept something that we could actually change and improve, it is equally problematic to waste a bunch of time and energy and emotion on constantly trying to change something about who we are that is just not going to change, that it's just going to be the way it is. And it can be incredibly disheartening and frustrating to work so hard on something and see nothing happen as a result. We can change our habits, our thoughts, our beliefs, and even our values, but the core internal traits of who we are that make up our respective personalities, the way we differ from one another on these traits, doesn't really appear to change much, if at all, throughout a person's lifespan, whether they're trying to or not. The way these personality traits show up in the world can change dramatically, but the traits themselves appear to be highly stable across a person's life. For example, if you are born more on the introverted side of the introversion-extroversion continuum, you might spend your childhood and your adolescence as a fairly shy, quiet, maybe even awkward or withdrawn person socially. That doesn't have to be your future. You can absolutely learn the skills and the tools to become charming, charismatic, socially skilled. You can even get to the point where you're the life of the party, where people can't wait for you to show up and talk to you. But what probably won't change in that circumstance is that you're still an introvert. And although you can do those things and do those things at a very high level, it will probably never get to the point where that is something that you can do indefinitely or something you want to do every day. If you're an introvert, it's always going to be a little bit draining for you to be on socially, and you'll probably always need downtime to recover from big social gatherings. I chose that example specifically because that's actually something I tried to do. I am not a hugely introverted person, but I'm definitely more on that side of the spectrum. And I noticed in grade school that the more, I didn't know what the term extroverted meant, I just noticed some people like talked more and had more friends and were more social. And I noticed it seemed to me like just everything about their lives was better. They made more friends, they got more dates, they even seemed to get better grades because they would, present and ask questions. And I remember thinking, man, if I could just be like that, I think it would solve most of my problems. And there were two faulty assumptions in that framework. The first was that I was capable of changing that about myself because I wasn't. I tried really, really hard. I'm pretty sure if it was possible for an introvert to become an extrovert, I would have done it because I basically made it the focus of my life for like 2 or 3 years. It never did. It didn't change. The other thing I was wrong about, though, was that it would have solved all of my problems because personality traits, things like introversion, extroversion, I'll give you a few more examples once we dive into this a little bit more, they're not actually good or bad. All personality traits are very much a pros and cons situation. Certain things are easier or go better for people who have certain personality traits, but there's always a flip side to that. There are also things that you may not see about people with that trait that are actually harder or more uncomfortable for them. And so there's two reasons why we should strive to accept our personality the way it is. One is you can't change it anyway. But to me, that's never good enough. Like if you say, hey, this sucks, but you can't change it, I'm still going to want to change it, right? But the other is that they're not good or bad. There are no personality traits that are inherently beneficial or inherently problematic. They are more adaptive for certain circumstances and less adaptive for circumstances. And so if you're an introvert, the goal isn't to become an extrovert. The goal is to work on crafting a life where being an introvert isn't a liability for you and doesn't hold you back from doing the things you want to do. So obviously the title of this piece of content is Your Personality, Feature or Bug. Feature or bug is a programming term. It refers to quirks or glitches in a particular piece of software that don't seem to be able to be fixed or changed. And if something can't be changed in a piece of software, the developers of that software are encouraged to basically work the software around it and consider it and present it as a feature rather than a bug or a problem, and find a way to work it into the final product rather than constantly trying to change it when we can't figure out a way to change it. And my favorite example of this of all time is Nuclear Gandhi. A few of you might already be familiar with that reference, but if you're not, there is a series of video games called Civilization. And in the Civilization games, you choose like a civilization, as the name implies, and they all have leaders. So you can choose to be like, India or China or North America. And you see your civilization through several different eras, and you basically try to make them the strongest through war or just diplomacy or resource management. And all of the other civilizations are typically controlled by the game, and they have their own different personality traits based on what the actual leaders of that culture were supposed to be like. And so the leader of India is Gandhi. And Gandhi is set in Civilization to be very peaceful. He's essentially a pacifist. He functions through diplomacy. But in one of the Civilization games, I can't remember if it was either 2 or 3, it was one of the earlier games, for some reason Gandhi was very, very nuke happy. Gandhi would rush nuclear technology and then just start dropping bombs on everybody and would generally behave in a way that was very uncharacteristic of how he was programmed to behave. And the programmers could not figure out why this was, and so they eventually gave up on it, released the game in that state, and people actually thought it was hilarious and awesome, which it is. Like Nuclear Gandhi, how is that not funny? And so when they made the sequel to that game, they had a new game engine, and like basically they could have fixed it because whatever the problem was, they remade everything from the ground up. But they actually chose to program Gandhi to basically just keep dropping big bombs on people because it became part of the lore of the game. Basically it became like a meme, right? And so this bug of Gandhi just nuking the crap out of everybody else became a feature of the Civilization games. I don't know if they still do that, but they did it for a while. That is essentially the framework through which I want you to consider your personality. Even though it might get in the way sometimes, even though it might be frustrating, even though it might be problematic, it's not a bug, it's not a glitch, it is a feature. And we're going to build that feature into the final product. Now, what the heck is your personality, right? That's a hard question to answer. There are many different models out there to help people understand who and what they are. I like simple ones. And there's one model called the Big Five theory of personality that is my personal favorite because it is simultaneously very simple to understand, but also, in my opinion, very comprehensive. I think it really explains pretty much everything about how and why we differ from one another. And so the core premise of Big Five, as the name implies, is that all of our respective differences basically boil down to 5 things. And all 5 of these things, all 5 of these personality traits exist on a continuum. So you can have the highest possible amount of this thing, the lowest possible amount of this thing, or anywhere in between, right? So what I'm gonna do with you today is explore these 5 personality traits, talk about what is good about being on either end of this continuum to help you appreciate your personality as a feature rather than a bug. The first, we already talked about this a little bit, is extroversion. And so a person who's high on extroversion would be someone who's considered to be extroverted, obviously. A person who's low on introversion is someone who would be considered to be introverted. Our world in general, meaning like society, at least here in North America, that's the only one I can really speak to, it generally looks like it's really geared towards extroverts. And in some domains that is true. There are a lot of things in life that are easier if you're an extrovert. Making friends tends to be easier. Networking tends to be easier, which results in a lot of opportunities for people. Like extroverts usually advance in their career faster because most careers involve dealing with other people and involve some level of social interaction. which means they find work less draining, they find social engagement less draining. They can maintain a large group of friends and they don't find that exhausting. In fact, they find it, awesome and energizing. So extroverts often have big, thriving, vibrant social lives. And the introverted among us often look at that and think, man, that like I know I wouldn't actually be happy if I had that. I'd find it kind of exhausting and draining. But I wish I was the kind of person who could do that, who could have like 30 friends and really actually keep up with all of them and, talk all day long at work and form strong relationships with these people. But I promise you this, extroverts have problems too. There are certain scenarios that happen in life that can really negatively impact our social functioning. And introverted people are much more resistant to these things. One example is FOMO, fear of missing out. That tends to hit extroverts a lot harder, and introverts are a lot more resistant to FOMO. Best example I can give of this is you're invited to something, a party or gathering or something like that. You're going to go out with friends, and they cancel last minute. You've probably seen there's a lot of like funny shorts and memes about this. When that happens and you're an introvert, you do the, oh no, but you're actually kind of like, yes, I was a little bit dreading this anyway. This was kind of going to feel like a lot of work. And now I get to have a nice quiet night in. Introverts are a lot less susceptible to peer pressure. We just aren't, because we're not quite as dependent on the approval or the opinions of other people, we're a little bit more able to maintain our boundaries in social situations and not just conform to what everyone around us is doing. There are also certain life changes that are really, really hard for extroverts that introverts tend to adapt to easier. The most common one that many people will face is when you have young children. Because when you have young children, that is almost certainly going to significantly reduce your social functioning for a period of time. Extroverts tend to have a really hard time in that phase of life. Like extroverts, when they have babies, toddlers, they often become very depressed because something that is a huge part of who they are and how they recharge and what they enjoy about life is much harder to access now. Introverts often do pretty well with that phase of life. Sometimes they even kind of thrive on it because it's like now they have what feels like a valid reason to not do this thing that they don't always love doing anyway, but kind of feel pressured to do. Hopefully nothing like this ever happens again. But another example of this was COVID. COVID was brutal for extroverts. COVID was horrible for extroverts. Introverts, especially if they were like very introverted, that might have been a time when they kind of thrived and were like, you know what? I've been preparing for this moment my whole life. I have to stay home all day and can't see people. Shoot, that's rough. So it's not good or bad. It's just pros and cons. That's extroversion. The second personality trait on the big five is openness to experience. And openness to experience is sort of defined as like, how willing are you to try new things, experience novelty, go out on adventures, things like that. And this is another one I think we tend to think it's better to be high. Like that's sort of the social perception is that people who are, like always open to trying something new and they're always up for adventure and they're more adaptable to change, that's just better. That's just a universally desirable human quality. And again, there are parts of those people's lives that are going to go easier for them. Again, when sudden unexpected changes happen at work, a person who has a high openness to experience might be more likely to see that as like fun or like an enjoyable challenge. Something changes at home, like something breaks at home. Oh, this is kind of an adventure. Like let's see this as an adventure and not like a hardship, right? Because they aren't super thrown off course by things not being what they expected or by things not going according to plan. They kind of thrive under those conditions. However, there are things that are much, much harder for people who have a high openness to experience. They not only enjoy novelty and adventure or thrive on it, they actually need it to a degree. And so people who are high on openness to experience tend to struggle with the phases or parts of life that are really monotonous, that don't have a lot of newness. They often struggle to set and maintain routines because routines feel constraining or unpleasant to them. Someone who's low on openness to experience is someone who's going to be pretty comfortable, maybe even happy, if their life has a lot of repetition. And frankly, that can be a strength too, because for most of us, life does have a lot of repetition. Most of us have certain parts of our day that are kind of the same every day. And someone with low openness to experience actually finds comfort in that. They like the predictability. They like the routine. They don't see it as boring or constraining or frustrating. They see it as safe, reassuring, enjoyable. They're good at setting new habits. They like to have habits. They don't need a lot of excitement or adventure in their lives to feel content. They might be a little bit more able to be content with less in terms of like less stuff, less vacations. They just don't need as much. And so being low on openness to experience, yeah, it's hard sometimes. You know, if you're dealing with a lot of change in life or often have a lot of opportunities to do new and exciting things, you're like, oh, that kind of makes me uncomfortable or I don't like that. It's not a liability. There are certain parts of life that are going to work much better for you if you're low on openness to experience. The third on the big five personality traits is conscientiousness. Conscientiousness could sort of be defined as a combination of work ethic and achievement. And so people who are high on conscientiousness, these are going to be your really hard workers. These are going to be the people who find more meaning or enjoyment in like getting stuff done than just doing things for pleasure or leisure. These are people who get a lot of esteem needs met from getting good grades in school, getting praise or advancements at work, maintaining their living space. And so they tend to look like these really high achieving people. And they are. And there are a lot of things, I know this is kind of repetitive to say it this way, but there's a lot of things in life that go easier for them because of that. They might not mind having a job that takes a little more out of them. They might be people who are comfortable with a 50, 60-hour a week workload. They might be people who tend to go above and beyond, do that next step, do that extra credit, and they're often very rewarded for their efforts, monetarily, promotion-wise, socially, etc. But I know, spoiler alert, not everything about these people's lives is better. People who are low on conscientiousness, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're lazy or that they're not hardworking. It just means their cup for like, I got enough done today, doesn't require as much to be full. And there can be strengths in that. People who are low on conscientiousness are much more able to enjoy downtime. They're more able to enjoy vacations. They can relax easier. They don't necessarily have this constant drive inside of them to always do more, always be better. They are less prone to perfectionism. They are less prone to guilt and shame. And they're generally just able to be more easygoing and take it easy. So there's pros and cons to this, right? As an employer, I want a lot of high conscientiousness people to work for me. I'm a high conscientiousness person myself. And that does give me certain strengths in life. That's probably the only reason I have a doctorate degree and a book and a YouTube channel. I can tell you this much though. As a high conscientiousness person, I am not a super fun person to be on vacation with. I am deeply uncomfortable with downtime. I don't like it. It makes my skin crawl. And that's not always fun for the people around me. So it's not universally a good thing. It's just one of the things that tends to look more valuable in the eyes of certain contexts. But low conscientiousness, there are many things about your life that are going to be easier and go better for you. The fourth personality trait is agreeableness. And so people who are high agreeableness, these are going to be people who are very not only aware of the wants, needs, and feelings of other people, but who very strongly factor those variables into their decision-making process. So these are going to be like your empaths, right? Your people pleasers, your people who really want to understand what's going on with everyone around them. They are friendly, they are caring, they often are really good at forming and maintaining strong bonds and strong relationships with people, but there are certain things about their lives that are harder too. If you're a low agreeableness person, you are more likely to be an assertive communicator. You are more likely to be able to give people direct feedback that doesn't feel like it has to be couched in a lot of qualifiers or variables. You might be less prone to being in a lot of one-sided relationships. High agreeableness people, they are more likely to be taken advantage of. Because if you're a high agreeableness person, and you've got a low agreeableness person in your life, that ends up being sort of this like really one-sided yin-yang kind of thing where both of you are focused on this other person in life. I've been watching a lot of that show couples therapy with Dr. Orna. I don't know if you guys watch that. It's awesome, and she's an amazing therapist, and she has confirmed my decision that I could never be a couples therapist because there's so many of these relationships where one person, not to be sexist, it's usually the guy. I don't know why that is. It's like the relationship is all about him and getting his needs met, and it's so unbalanced because the woman is so agreeable that her natural inclination is just to go with it. And a degree of that can be healthy. But when it's like one person is over here and the other person is over here, these tend to be really unhealthy relationships. And people who are low on agreeableness have an easier time maintaining their boundaries. They're less likely to be taken advantage of, like financially or time wise, by people. And they're more able to see when someone is maybe trying to take advantage of them. I think I said that like 3 times, so you probably get the point. The 5th personality trait, this one's going to sound universally negative at first, but it's not, is neuroticism. And neuroticism essentially is defined as the frequency and intensity with which you experience unpleasant emotions. So feelings like sadness or anger or fear. Sorry about that notification sound. High neuroticism people just feel those feelings more strongly and more intensely. And obviously that doesn't sound great, right? So if you're a high neuroticism person, life hurts a little bit more for you. You might be described as, more sensitive, more fragile. I think these are hurtful terms that are not necessarily true, but you feel your feelings more strongly. There are good things about this. High neuroticism people tend to detect problems more quickly, whether that's problems in the workplace, problems in relationships, problems in a living situation. Now, it also means we are a little more prone to false alarms, yes. And sometimes we see problems that aren't there, but we're not going to miss a lot. We're not going to get caught off guard very often by like, oh, I didn't realize this wasn't going well. There are certain professions that you basically have to be high neuroticism to function in. Especially professions that to some degree are kind of adversarial. Two types of professions. Why was that so hard to say? That I've worked with a lot in therapeutic and coaching contexts are lawyers and law enforcement officers. And if you're a low neuroticism person and you want to go into one of those careers, you're going to have a tough time. Because in both those careers, to a degree anyway, I'm probably not perfectly characterizing them because I haven't done those jobs, but it's kind of like me against you to some degree. And if you're not able to anticipate, what this person is going to do or when they might try to hurt you, whether literally if you're a law enforcement officer or like hurt your case if you're a lawyer, you need pessimism. You kind of need to be able to see the worst in people because it's going to happen and you're going to need to be prepared for it. High neuroticism people are also going to have an easier time relating to other people who are struggling. So a therapist, like if you saw a therapist who was just really naturally happy and only got, depressed or anxious when something really awful was happening, how well does that person understand you? Probably not super well, right? A high neuroticism person is not necessarily the person you call when you want to go out and have a good time. They're not necessarily the person you call because you want to have a fun, lighthearted, easygoing night. They are going to be the person you call when you're having a tough day and you need to talk to somebody who gets it. Low neuroticism, it's probably not super hard to see the pros of that. They're going to be more optimistic. They're probably going to be a little bit more resilient to the stressors and challenges that come with life and the ebb and flow of the things that we face. They're going to be a little bit more easygoing, go with the flow. They're just not as bothered by stuff. They don't take everything so seriously all the time. They're less likely to read into your actions or your words, more likely to just take you at face value. And if you say you're happy, they're going to say, okay, cool. So you're happy, so I don't have to worry about anything. And they probably enjoy more frequent experience of positive emotion, which obviously is a good thing. But hopefully, in my breakdown of these 5 personality traits, I hope that this helps you with 2 things. Number 1 is, I hope it helps you understand yourself a little bit better. And there are some tools online where you can actually kind of try to take some assessments and plot out, like, where am I on these 5 continuums? And, do I lean more towards this side or this side? And I think there can be a lot of value with that insight. But perhaps even more important is I hope you realize that wherever you fall on these five continuums, that's not good or bad. That's not right or wrong. That's just you. And there's going to be invariably certain chapters in your life where being you makes that chapter really hard. Like, yeah, again, for me that was like middle school and high school. I'm low extroversion, low openness to experience, high conscientiousness, high agreeableness, high neuroticism. That mix of things does not make for a great like K through 12 experience at all. But it does make my career. I think I'd be very bad at what I do if I wasn't that guy. It makes my marriage go pretty smoothly because I'm able to be most of the time, I think, like pretty receptive to my wife's needs and my kids' needs. There are a lot of things in life where I'm like, if I wasn't me and didn't have all my quirks and oddities and weirdnesses, I probably wouldn't be very good at this thing. And that's not unique to me. That's true for you as well. Whoever you are, there are certain things in life that you're just going to be really good at and are going to go really smoothly for you because you are that person. And I think really our aim here is not to try to make yourself something you're not, but to try to arrange your life around who you are and make, your career and your living space and your partner selection and all the other big decisions that we have to make in life congruent with who we are rather than like aspirational. Like I want to be this kind of person, so I'm going to choose a life that this kind of person would have and just hope that makes me this kind of person. Because in terms of these traits, that probably won't happen and you'll probably end up just feeling like a misfit and an outcast, as I have for much of my life until I understood these things. As always, I hope this helps and I hope to see you again soon. Take care.